New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you over here.
Yeah, Reverend Mark Gilbert. I guess I'm the guest today.
You are very much the guest today, Reverend Mark. Good to see you. Reverend LT is doing a little work travel, so he isn't able to be with us. And Reverend Mark's been on the show a couple of times now, so we're grateful to have you back and another chance to chat and connect and talk all about how New Thought, this amazing philosophy, is inspiring, uplifting the planet, moving into the future, all the ways that that we're going to take this out into the world, into the future. And one of the things I love about having you with us, Reverend Mark, is you've actually, in the past, I'd say it's 2-3 years now, it seems, you've taken a really deep dive into more of the history of New Thought. But every time I turn around, you're making it relevant to where we are today and where we're going. So how did that all get started for you? You've got your book collection, your library in the background. I know you've been
it's related to that.
Cataloging that and keeping that all track. But how did you find yourself being pulled to more of the historical side of what we are, and then again how it relates to where we're going?
All right, you're going to hear the story on that. I am going to say hi to Fiona over in Switzerland. I see she's watching, and I see the comment in the comment box there. So welcome to Fiona. Hey, here's how it came about, Robert. I had worked up in the home office for Centers for Spiritual Living for 10 years. And I, during the midst of COVID, was taking care of my elderly father who had moved to live with us. And long story short, I ended up retiring from CSL. He passed shortly after that, and I was in this midst of what's next in my life. And I sat in sort of the mystery of that for a while. And part of what I was doing during that time after my retirement from home office and my passing of my father was looking at what I was being called to do. Because in fact, my whole life has been one series of callings to another calling to another calling. And I was sitting in that mystery for a little while. Only thing I was really doing was maintaining my blog site, Conscious Bridge. I was doing some YouTube videos on my YouTube channel. But other than that, I was taking some time off and reflection and so forth. And in the midst of all of that, there were a couple of things that sort of called me to look at my books, that you were mentioning the books behind me. And what happened is that we had done some new flooring in this level of the house, and we had to move all the books out. And when we moved them all back in, and we had these movers who hauled them out and moved them back, and they were in boxes, and I just threw them up on the shelves because I didn't have time to actually go through the sorting process. And so during this time, I thought, well, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to reorganize my books. And I'm also going to update my database, and a shout out to librarything.com for those of you who want a nice cataloging system. It's an online system there you can use and get an app on your phone, and it helps you categorize your books. And so I went through this entire process where I took, several hours every day going through my books and organizing them by topic and category. And what's not self-evident is there's a row behind me. So not only is the books you see, but there's a row that it goes behind there, and it's on both sides. And we also have some books back over in that area of the room as well. And so we have probably, between my wife and I, like 2,500 books. And I know that exactly because of the database. It's actually 27 something.
Right on.
and growing every day.
How many were duplicates?
It's a good question. We actually had, because my wife and I met in prac class, and we had a lot of Science of Mind books, practitioner training. We had a lot of books that were duplicate of both of Ernest Holmes' Science of Mind books and things like that. But one of the reasons I got the database was because we kept buying the same damn book over and over. We forget that we had it, or that one of it, or my wife would get it, or I'd get it, and she'd say, "Oh, if we've already got that book," or I would tell her we've already got that book. And so now we sort of check the database if we think we're going to buy something a little older and make sure we don't already have it. But yeah, we do have a fair number of duplicates. And some of those I've sold off on eBay and so forth, but we still have plenty of duplicates. But anyway, so I'm going through this book process and I'm organizing everything. And like most folks, if you buy a lot of books, you find a lot of books that you never got around to reading because you didn't have time. And I was finding a lot of books I'd never read. And a lot of them were New Thought books that were older New Thought books. Mm. And that whole process of going through my books and categorizing and organizing them led me to looking at books I wanted to read. And so I created a stack of books by early New Thought authors. The first one I explored was Donald Curtis, who was first a Science of Mind and then a Unity minister back in the middle part of the latter half of the 20th century. He was a movie actor turned New Thought minister. Read some of his books, and then I got interested in the Kabbalion and William Walker Atkinson, and and I did one of the Wisdom of the Mystics programs on New Thought Media last year, where I spoke on Atkinson. He's a fascinating topic. But so what happened is, in the midst of reading these books, it sort of had led to this rebirth of getting interested in New Thought philosophy and its foundings. And so I did several things in regards to that. I just said, this is what's next for me. This is what's next. And and immediately the universe said, okay, we got you. And I was contacted by Home Office asking me if I would teach the online class for Roots, which gets into the roots of Science of Mind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it was very relative to it. And then I was invited to join the board of the archives, the Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, and I've been on their board now for probably a little close approaching a year and a half now. So I'm doing a lot of work with the archives, and I also, in the midst of all this, revamped my Conscious Bridge website so that I started using it as a repository for New Thought authors and books and content. And I went on this vast search. I sort of like retooled the blogs I was writing about to try to take the articles and readings I was doing and bring them up to date. Like, here's something Donald Curtis said, or here's something from the Kabbalion, or here's something from some other New Thought author. And how does this relate to our lives today? And just exploring that in my blogs. And so that's what I started a little over a year ago doing. And I also started creating pages on my website to have links to things that I found online about these various New Thought authors. And so if you went out and wanted to, using Atkinson as an example, if you went and found, Atkinson he wrote about 200 books, and most of them are out on the internet for free in his ebooks, or in many cases audiobooks. And so what I did was I did this vast research to find where these source materials were that we could be free resources, and then started and posted links on the site. So there is, on that website that you were just showing, you don't have to go into it now, but on the top of it there is a thing for resources, and you go down and follow through, and you're going to find all kinds of resource library, and you're going to find all kinds of different websites and things underneath that. Lots of pages under that with content and links. So that's how I got started. That's where the interest is, and that's been my focus now for going on over a year now.
Yeah. And I love it. I've been a long-time reader of your blog, Conscious Bridge, and do my best to make sure others know about it and see it. And I really do appreciate what you've done with your update and your upgrade on your website, because it makes things a little bit easier to find and makes your most contemporary and your most topical creations readily available for us all. So Thank you for putting it all together. I'm sure it's a labor of love.
Yes. Right. I do a lot of stuff that's just for my own fun. In fact, that's been the topic among my wife and I. She recently retired, and we've been having this sort of like she's taken some class through a person at Mile High Church, and one of the topics that they were discussing was, this spending the minutes of your day on the things that bring you joy. And so that's been the topic of conversation around our house, is what brings us joy, and that's what we try to fill our time with. And I say, there's a lot of things. It's a long list, but that bring me joy. But most of my day, even if it's stuff that is just organizing New Thought stuff or working on stuff for the archives, which has been a big project for me lately. It's just a labor of love, and it's a lot of fun doing it. I just find it's a hoot.
You bring up a great question. Do New Thought ministers actually retire? I mean, completely retire. I don't know that I've ever seen one that just was like, yeah, I'm done. I went to the beach and you never hear from me again.
There's maybe a few, but they're few and far between. And once that consciousness is in their minds, and their outlook on life is driven by a New Thought outlook, I doubt that anybody really walks away from that and goes back totally in the world of form and forgets the science of mind or New Thought thoughts that are coming up in their minds. So yeah, and then they're always finding stuff to do.
And yes, and it seems like stuff always finds us too.
Yeah.
much like one of your latest projects, you're doing again with the archives, but the archives has been releasing newer versions of older audio. And for a long time, there's been a handful of audio recordings available, whether it's on YouTube or other places throughout the internet. But it seems like there's a real effort to step up the frequency and therefore the size of the collection of available audio talks. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. And kudos to the entire team at the archives, but and Kathy Mastriani, who's the executive director. Shout out to her as well. Part of this came about after I got on the board. I went to Kathy and I said, I've got a lot. I have my own website, as you know, and I do a lot of stuff online, and I have a lot of nerdy technical skills, and so I can. Why are we not? And I said, why are we not posting more Ernest Holmes content on the website? I knew that there was a lot of content that was behind the scenes that had never been brought out to the public, and she said, well, it's for lack of volunteers. That it takes a little bit of training to go through the process of it, and we don't have anybody currently who knows how to do it. And I said, well, I'll do it. And so one of the first things I did was there's a whole body of transcripts of things that Holmes did, like his radio shows, his phonograph records, his Sunday talks, his classes. There's just all this, his magazine articles. There's all this content that has been transcribed and is in Word documents sitting on file servers within the archives. And I'm talking hundreds of stuff that may not be out in the public's eye. Mm-hmm. And so we went through the process of what we would need to do, the steps to get that formatted, a cover on it, etc., and put it up on the website. And so now what I basically have done is I started working on just taking the content that was already transcribed and getting it ready and then putting it up on the website. And behind the scenes, it's a login, and you post it as a product, and people can either, in the cases of most stuff, they can buy it, or if they're a subscriber to the website or a friend of the archive, then they get it. They get so many free downloads a month. And so we're posting, what we've been trying to do is flow new content on there all the time, of written content. And then we started publicizing that through social media and through the newsletter that the archive sends out and so forth. Well, that project led to two offshoot projects. One of them was, how do we really know what all Ernest did? and what of it that we know that he did do we have? And so that led to one project where I created a spreadsheet and started categorizing all of the things that we knew. And this is available for anybody who wants to go see it, by the way. Our working spreadsheet is on the archives website. It's if you go under free resources and go down to tools, you'll find a thing, and you can click on it and you can open up and view and it's basically everything we know about Ernest Holmes' work, all his books, and there's tabs at the bottom. And so if you're interested in Ernest Holmes and geek out on stuff about Holmes, you will love this, because you can basically click on the one about radio shows, and all of his radio shows and TV shows that he did that we know about. We have the dates, the titles, and then columns that indicate, do we have a recording of it? Do we have a transcript of it? Is it out on the website yet, and so forth, and notes about it. So you have that for every one of his things. Okay, you want to see research tools there. If you want me to talk you through it, you go up to the one that says research tools, click on that for a moment, and and then right there, research inventory, and go down there. It says link to view the Google Sheet inventory. That one you'd scrolled, but there's all kinds of, by the way, tons of stuff. This page we created because we started working. We got the permission from a minister who had created used to sell a product, and she gifted it to the archives. Catherine Neville Smith is her name, and she provided us a document with all these Ernest Holmes quotes in it. So if you love Ernest Holmes and you want quotes, you can download it for free right there. It's that Ernest Holmes quotes for free thing. And you're going to download a searchable document where you can search all these quotes by term or phrase. Great resource. I know a lot of ministers use it for their talks and things like that. There's another great resource. It does cost, but Dr. Tom Sanner has made available to his source book. That's like 1,000 pages of different commentaries, quotes. It is just a fantastic research tool for anybody who's interested in the science of mind. And it is available to purchase through the archives website. And the archives, he's gifted the archives the proceeds from that book.
Oh, wonderful.
And so the other document, the other thing we didn't go into, was the Google spreadsheet that I was talking about. And that's where we have all his listings of Ernest Holmes' works by category. So it's phonograph records, Asilomar talks, his magazine articles sorted by issue date, his books. What am I leaving out here? Sunday talks. But it's all the categories of stuff that he did that we know about, and what of that we know about does the archives have a copy of it?
Right.
And so we're continuing to do that. It's a continuing work in process, but it's led to some really, really cool discoveries of stuff through all of this. And one of those is that Holmes did a lot of talks through the 1950s at the Asilomar conferences right south of Monterey, California. Mm-hmm. And for anybody who's a longtime student of science of mind or is probably familiar and links Asilomar to Ernest Holmes in their minds or the philosophy, because up until this century, both prior organizations that had science of mind had annual conferences. There were two conferences each year, one by the Religious Science International, which became International Centers for Spiritual Living. And then the other group was the United Church of Religious Science, which became United Centers for Spiritual Living. And those are the two groups who melded into CSL, or Centers for Spiritual Living. But as for most of the last part of the 20th century, the two groups would meet every week on different every summer on different weeks at Asilomar and had their own conferences. And so people who have been in science of mind forever, link Asilomar with the philosophy. And although recent times and cost and change of contractors with the state of California has led to CSL not going there every year, they are going there this year. Most folks who have a long history with the science of mind have this sort of mental link between the two. And it goes back to the 1950s. 1954 was actually the first year that the United side started going to Asilomar, and Holmes spoke every year. Now, for history's sake, I'll just mention that the first summer conference was actually in 1953. And it was hosted by the predecessor of the international side, and this was before the so-called split. Okay. But
yep.
they had a summer conference in the Sierra Nevada mountains at a place called Camp Sierra, and Holmes spoke there every day. And it was actually led to the publication of a little book in the 1950s, and I'm grabbing a copy here off my desk. It's called the Seminar Lectures. And it was a little volume where they transcribed all of his lectures that he did at Camp Sierra in 1953 and put them out in that book. The book came out in 1955 and then was republished about 15 years later. But that's the only book that's ever come out on Holmes' talks during this period of time. And beginning in 1954, early in 54, the two organizations split.
Right.
And the international side kept going to Camp Sierra for 2 more years, but the United side started going to Asilomar in 1954. And so Holmes would speak at the Asilomars for the United side, and he did up and through 1959. And most of those talks, back to this inventory, is we've realized most of them have never been published. There is one that was published that is most famous, and most people know about it, and that's the so-called Sermon by the Sea.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was his very last talk he did in 1959. So the last year he was there, because he died early in 1960, the last year he was there and the last talk he did. And that's the one where he has sort of the repetition of, bring me one man who can do da-da-da. And it's a great talk. And it was his vision for the future of science of mind and religious science, which was a topic very much on his mind at that point in his life.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is we're bringing it all out. And so we've been doing a lot of research to bring forth all his talks from those years, gather as many of them as we can find. We have some that we've not been able to find, but we have everything from 1956 through 1959. And that includes, in 1957, he did a 5-part class on mysticism. And it's one part of it has been published, but the whole class has never been published before. And so we're taking all of the content that we can find from 54 through 59 of him at Asilomar and bringing that out. We're bringing it out with pictures of him at Asilomar. We're also doing an introduction that I've been working on that talks about the history of Asilomar and some of the stuff that I was just telling you a little bit about the two organizations and their paths and so forth. It's exciting. Science of Mind Publishing will be bringing it out under their imprint, and a lot of it is we're still in the developmental and writing stages and research, but it's coming together. And right now it's so much content that it may end up being 2 books, but it's going to be wonderful. And I'm having the luxury and gift of reading through Holmes' works from this period of time and capturing some of his exciting words and quotes and it's just been a fun project, Robert.
Well, I'd say I appreciate the work you're doing, and I know there's a lot of others out there, and I have to also know that this is going to make life easier for generations of ministerial students to come. When I was in school, there was a unofficial collection of mimeographed, photocopied, the unpublished works that I think I still have a 3-ring binder of those laying around here somewhere. And I think it's very important for us to remember, not just remember, but really dig into. I'm incredibly excited to see this talk on mysticism, this class, right? To dig into, because it's natural, folks. We've been living this philosophy for now longer than Holmes was teaching it. Really, it's been a part of the world. And I never realized he was only at Asilomar for a handful of years, 6, 7 years, coming up in this philosophy. Yeah, it's holy ground, and we know of this talk and other things. But even our history on those grounds goes longer than how often Holmes was there. So it's important, I think, not to just not to lose this, but also be able to plumb those depths for what are the keys, where maybe have we strayed a little, maybe where have we allowed ourselves to be pulled away from what Holmes said, and is that movement closer or further away, more or less valid? Truthfully, we get to kind of restudy from the master, from the originator of this all.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people find going back to the older writers that the language and style, sometimes they find that as a barrier as an entry point into the philosophy. And I do get that, but I do think at a certain point, somebody who is a student of this, they need to go back and read some of the early people. And I encourage folks not only to, don't just stop with Holmes, go back to the roots, to even earlier.
Yeah.
To many of these the New Thought writers who, there was a real blossoming of New Thought in the late 1800s, early 1900s. There were many people who were writing New Thought tracts in the period of like 1880s to 1920. So many books and magazines were published during that time with such great and wonderful content. Much of it is, as I've gone back and read it, and being a student of Holmes, I'll be reading something, of some old journal or a book by somebody, and I'll find something. Okay, Holmes took that from here, from this guy, and Christian D. Larson is one that is another interesting story I could launch into. But Christian D. Larson was a major influence on both Ernest and Fenwick Holmes, and there's a lot of concepts that were in his books that Holmes latched onto. We tend to talk about Emma Curtis Hopkins, we talk about Thomas Troward, we talk about Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Yep.
It's the big three major influences on Ernest Holmes. But Ernest had a lot of other influences, and one of the things when you're reading some of these transcripts of his talks from the 1950s, you can see that that the Indian teacher Aurobindo comes up so much in there. And it's been said that Sri Aurobindo, he read The Life Divine of his, which is a big, thick book. I could pull it off my shelf, but it's heavy as all get out. And Holmes read it once every year in the last few years of his life. He was getting so much from that book.
Yes. Fiona's still with us. Thank you for chiming in again, Fiona. Agree. I've been reading lately Merton and Thomas Berry for their timeless wisdoms.
Yeah. You got to go back to all these people, and what you find is that all these people that you start reading, and my advice to folks is let your intuition guide you to who the right person is for you. We've all got the different people. I mean, I can recommend people that have been important to me, but they may not resonate where you are on your path in this moment. I've been telling everybody, read the Kybalion, read the Kybalion, read the Kybalion. It's published under the name Three Initiates, but it was really written by a New Thought author by the name of William Walker Atkinson. But I've also got to recognize that some people may come to the Kybalion and go, this is a bunch of bull, and they're not resonating with it. So you got to find who is resonating with you. And I sort of bounce around and read who is speaking to me, in the particular moment.
Yeah.
One other project, since I'm sort of like rambling on here, that is so exciting, you referenced it earlier, and this is such a fun thing to do, is the archives has tons of recordings of people. And by that, I mean tons of recordings of people who spoke at Asilomar for the last 60 years. And so many people who say, they contact the archives from time to time and say, we'd like to, can you put out that talk by so-and-so in the late 1990s on such and such, and they may have it on DVD or on CD somewhere in there, because at that point stuff was on CD. But, right now, the limited resources and time of the volunteers who are working on this, we have to sort of like focus our energies. And what the big focus has been on lately, and the project that's been taking up a lot of my time is bringing out the recordings of Ernest Holmes. We have at least 200 recordings of Ernest Holmes on different things that we're trying to bring out. And most folks have heard his. There was a series of he did a radio show called Life. Mm-hmm. he started it in late 1949, and it ran up until early 1952, and then it was handed over to another guy, William Hornaday, who then took it on and continued it for many years. But the Holmes years of this radio show, we have like 80 or so of these recordings. The only ones that really ever got out into the public a lot was in the 1970s. There was this little cassette series of cassettes that were called the Golden Series, and they basically took Holmes talks off of the radio show. Radio show would be about 30 minutes long. Holmes talk about 16, 17 minutes long. They took his talks and put them on the cassettes, one talk on each side. And they made about, 13 or 14 of these things. And so those talks from those shows are the only ones that have really been out in the public domain. And you can find them out on the internet and different church websites and things like that. But what we're doing at the archives is we're going back to the original full recordings of the entire radio show. And we've had a team and a guy named Park Peters, who works with Audio Media here in Denver. Shout out to him, because he's been just putting hours of efforts into doing the digitization work of this stuff. And then they're handed over. We put little clips, on the beginning and the ends of them about recognizing that it's from the archives and where to go for more info. And then we post it on the website, and we're making them available to people who are subscribers for no extra cost. So if you're already a subscriber or a friend of the archive, you get these included in your memberships. And we're putting out 1 or 2 recordings every week, and not only of Holmes, but Raymond Charles Barker.
Yeah.
And Raymond Charles Barker was a contemporary and trained by Holmes, but he was the main speaker on the international side after the split. So Holmes was the sort of like star for the United side, and Barker was the star for the international side. And Barker, of course, lived on for many, many years, and he was the head of the Religious Science Church in New York. He used to speak at the Lincoln Center there, and his Sunday talks were broadcast on radio. And we have a fair number of Barker's audios, and we're trying also to bring much of the Barker work out. But here's the other thing. So we got those 2, and we're already in the process of bringing them out on a flow basis. And one other exciting thing is Ernest Holmes did a whole series of phonograph records, and we've just recently digitized some. He did this whole series of like five LPs on Bible themes, which he put out in 1959, right before he passed.
Wow.
And we have just digitized these in the last couple of weeks. And so you're going to see them coming out
Cool.
soon. And one other thing we did that's really exciting, that and a shout out to Jim Van Cleve for helping to fund this, is we did a whole total redigitization of that one video of Holmes from his TV show. And everybody's probably seen that online. And it's sort of like fuzzy. It's from that kinescope stuff.
Yeah.
And we're going to be rolling that out in early April. It'll be out on the Archives YouTube channel, a total remastering of the video. And it's much cleaner and clearer, and I think it's going to be exciting. We're going to have a little bit of a promo push around that coming up soon.
Well, I'll say I've been a member for quite a while, and folks, if it's the best $10 I spend every month to be a member of the archive, and I got it set up on an auto pay, so I don't even have to think about it. And anytime I'm looking for a resource, I can jump over. I've got my downloads. I rarely use them all, but I'm starting to get a little more addicted to some of these things and digging in and finding these other resources that have existed. And this is the point in the show where if Elzia was with us today, he'd remind us that he wandered in and watched Barker a few times back when he was living in New York at Lincoln Center. Didn't really know who he was, didn't know what he was listening to, just kind of went with some buddies and this guy's okay, and all of that. We often, like, if I look at your book collection, I do not have the time to read that many books anymore. Life moves way too fast for me to be, and I've got a stack of things right now on my shelf. This effort makes it easy to pull up that talk and let it move and let it capture you. and the audios especially. I've never had heard Barker until just a couple of weeks ago, when the archives released that interview, that talk, and to be able to hear a man I've heard so much about, and I've read a few of his essays and a few of his books, but I think it's really, really important. So, folks, we're sharing the link to the archives with you in the chat box. It is pretty easy, scienceofmindarchives.com. You can find them, and you can find more information on their website. Look on Facebook, YouTube, they're around. And, New Thought Media Network, we've been partnering with the archives on a few different projects over the past couple of years. We're not doing the Wisdom of the Mystics program any longer, but it was a great program. And those archives, those past episodes live on our YouTube page. You can find them there. Do a quick search for Wisdom of the Mystics and New Thought Media Network, and they'll come up. And there was a whole series of interviews that Reverend Laura Topper and Reverend Kathy Mastriani, the executive director there at the archives, did these various interviews of contemporary ministers sharing the wisdom of the older the mystics that have gone on ahead of us. So, Mark, we're kind of at that point. What would you say is the best use of these materials? How can what the archives is doing serve to keep New Thought alive in the future, and how we can use this to influence and inspire the coming generations of folks that are going to, in my perspective, really benefit by knowing what New Thought is?
Yeah, there's a number of ways that you can use this, and one of them is finding and using these materials if you're teaching classes. So if you're a person who finds yourself a minister, practitioner, or somebody teaching a Science of Mind class, and you're looking for some content, there is tons of documents that are downloadable that you can use, and then from them copy the text, etc., into your own talks or training materials and things of that nature. You can also use the audios as well. And in fact, as an example of that, we've done, and a shout out to Reverend Martha Quintana, who's also on the board, who came up with this idea that after she got so excited over all these audios that we were putting out, she said, let's create a series of discussion programs that are based on using the audios. And so she's created a once-a-month program that she's hosted, and some of the other of us that work with the board, including myself, will be hosting some of the others this year. But it's a 1-hour program called Lunch and Learn, where we invite people to come on live on Zoom. They stop and they listen to a short recording of something by Holmes. We're usually trying to use some pieces, a lot from his phonograph records, where he did short topics that are bite-sized in a sense, and then have a discussion question around what Holmes was talking about, and then they're put into breakout groups and go and talk on that and come back and then share in the larger group. It's a Lunch and Learn program. If you're interested in that, the schedule of those is out on the archives website. There's also links to the videos of the two that have already occurred. I think we've got another one coming up probably this week or next week, but it's advertised there as well on the archives website, including the link if you want to participate in it. So you can go there and find out. I think it's on the third Thursdays of the month, as I recall, and the link is on the website for you that'll take you right to the Zoom thing. So if you're a member of the archives newsletter and you get the newsletter, you'll get the info on it. But if you're not, go to the archives website and sign up for the newsletter, or the link for that program is there. If you miss the program, you can also watch the videos, because we record them and put them up on there. But back to your question, Robert, is this material really is, Sandra Ray looks like she's hosting the one coming up this month. Yeah. That will be on whatever that date was. Right there. Anyway, third Thursdays, 12 to 1 Mountain Time. The link is there on the home page.
That would be this Thursday, folks.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Time to sign up right now for this week's episode.
There you go. But it's great, because what Reverend Martha's done is she's gone through all these recordings and and you'll hear the recordings, even some of them before we even put them out on the website. So that way you'll get get sort of a sneak preview of some of the audios of Holmes that are in our collection that are coming out, because eventually they're all going to be made available to everybody. That's our goal. But we're bringing them out over a period of time. So using that material in your own training material is one way, and to deepen your own stuff. It's good to write. It's good to read the people you're intuitively drawn to, that are the current authors and teachers for you, that speak to you. But I would invite you to supplement that material by going back and looking at some of the older people, like Fiona was talking about, where she was looking at Thomas Merton. It's just, I've got my whole list of people that I'm going back and looking at now. I mix it up with contemporary writers and older writers and sort of compare and contrast what they're saying. And sometimes the different voices and different ideas helps crystallize in my own mind what they were trying to say. Sometimes I might not quite get it from Holmes. I'll get it from somebody else. I'll finally go, aha, see what they're talking about. And then I'll come back to Holmes, and Holmes said it too. And I just didn't catch it the first time because it went over my head.
Yeah. As you're sharing this, it strikes me, one of those classic lines we use in this philosophy all the time. We're not here to teach you what to think. We're here to teach you how to think. And I have always found that it's that kind of back and forth. Wait a minute, you're saying it this way, and this guy's saying it this way. Do they jive?
Yeah.
And taking that critical view of, all right, and how does that align with what I believe and my experience and my lived experience and what I'm taking out into the world? Do these things all line up? And if not, hey, that's a great question for me to consider. Is what I'm thinking just an ego-based trip, or is this actually an evolution of the philosophy as it's been? We know that we all have to explain and share what we know based in the terms of the day.
Yeah.
My experience over the last handful of months and weeks is, it isn't that we're translating what others have said. There's talk now of a gender neutral version of the science of mind. There's talk of newer versions of the science of mind textbook, considering, should we do this? Can we do this? Is it proper or ethical to do this? I think it's in some ways our calling, our mandate, to bring the old language into a contemporary form, but not to change the essence of the message itself. Not because these are universal truths we're talking about. They weren't just a convenient truth of the moment.
Yeah. I would agree. I think, I think in some cases it's great to have both. You have the original writings and voice and whatever they said, but then if we want to bring it forward, let's modify it and bring in language that will speak to today's readers and not turn them off. Sometimes the older language can be stilted, or it can be written from the patriarchal voice that that is insulting to the modern ear. But you also want to go back and hear it in the original as well, just so that you can compare and contrast them and see what it gets for you. My take on a lot of what you
sometimes transcripts can be confusing if you can't hear the inflection, if you don't hear the timing, if you don't hear where the pauses are. I've gotten lost in that before, where the transcription confuses me because there's no real context to how it was presented. It's just a string of words on the paper. And truthfully, when I first found this thing, I had the hardest time in the world reading Troward at first.
Yeah.
Eventually I came to love the long sentences and the drawn out creation of his point. But it could take 3, 4, 5 pages sometimes for him to say something that Holmes would say in a paragraph. But that also serves the richness of studying this philosophy, I think.
Yeah, and for me, and maybe because I've been immersed in it over the last few months, but listening to Holmes, and working with this audio project, I hear his voice in my head all the time. And I hear it, especially when I'm reading these transcripts for Asilomar that I was talking about earlier, that I can hear him, even though I don't have the recording of what I'm reading, I can hear. And so, and Holmes is an interesting character, because in his books, they were sort of edited to be succinct to a degree.
Right.
But when he spoke, he was very much extemporaneous, and he would launch into little asides and stuff, which is frustrating sometimes when you're trying to read him and you want to read through and get the point of what he's talking about.
Right.
And all of a sudden you've got like a long little story about somebody he interacted with that day, or something, but which leads to to somewhat of a funny little story quote. But to me, it almost humanizes him too, because we can somewhat, when we look back at these older people, it's easy to sort of like deify them and put them up on a pedestal. And I think when you go back and hear their extemporaneous language, either in audio or in the written form, it humanizes them, and it makes you realize there's just sort of like us, that we can be up and talking in front of a group, and it's like, squirrel, I'm over here on something for a little while.
Yep.
And we're all that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why, as this book comes out, and in the intro to it, I do talk about that a little bit in the piece that I put together, is that you have to sort of be aware that a transcript of a talk, it reads differently from the and anybody who's read the Holmes papers, because that's what all of those were a lot of his material. In fact, that's another project we're working on right now. The Holmes project, the Holmes papers, by the way, here's a little history thing for anybody who has this weird geeky thing I have apparently, is that George Bindle was a minister who worked with Holmes and in his later years, and actually moved into the house and lived with him after his wife Hazel passed, just to sort of be a personal assistant and get him from place to place. And Bindle, after Holmes' passing, a number of years afterwards, went through a lot of Holmes' the notes they had of Holmes' stuff in his later years, and put together what was initially a series of 3 books, which were published into the one volume that Robert was just holding up. But those books, Bindle gathered the information, and many of the things that are in them are from what was called the Tuesday Invitational Class. Ernest Holmes had a group of people who were invited to come in and have a class with him every Tuesday, and this was the more advanced people, where he went into more advanced concepts and what he was currently thinking. And that's why the Asilomar stuff is so good. Asilomar was also more advanced than most of his magazine articles and radio talks. They were more introductory, welcome you into the fold, introduce you to the philosophy. Asilomar in his Tuesday classes were where he would go deeper into the concepts. So once you've got the basics, I mean, like the Asilomar book, I would not recommend that as an intro book for Science of Mind to anybody. You got to go elsewhere. But then once you're into philosophy, this book that's going to be coming out, this is going to allow you to go a little deeper, because you're going to get the more esoteric stuff. And by then, hopefully, you've read enough of Holmes that when you're reading his spoken word stuff, that it makes it a little easier for you. But the point I was going to get to is that in the meantime that we're working on this, and a shout out to this lady in Nan in California. There, it's also part of her team. She's been doing the transcripts for us of stuff, because many of these old talks, they're on this thin onion-skinned paper that's very frail and broken. And what was happened back in the day is they either had somebody transcribing Holmes' words, or they made a recording, which they, like the old dictaphones, so those little. If you're anybody old as me, you might remember the little blue little loop things you would use. That stuff Holmes would get transcribed, and they'd make these copies. The typed copies were made with carbons. We got a pre-photocopy, and so you got all this thin onion sheet paper where they made about as many copies as they could of something, right. And the precious important people got a copy of that thing, and so there's only a limited numbers of these copies of these onion skin transcripts,
right?
And so what we've been doing is taking those and scanning them and then transcribing them, and that's what Nan out in California has been doing for much of this work. Well, the ones we're working on now are the Tuesday classes, and if again back to that spreadsheet I mentioned that's on the archive thing, if anybody's curious, we keep that. You're getting a snapshot of something that's updated all the time. And so if you're curious, how many of the Tuesday classes do we have transcripts of? You can go out there and look at it. It's one of the tabs. and it'll tell you the date, and if we know a title for it, and if we have the transcript of it, and that sort of thing. But we are in the midst of going back and trying to find as many of the Tuesday class talk notes as we can, and that might turn into another book too in the upcoming years. That's the vision, is to bring all of these back out as well. And then again, this is Holmes' deeper stuff. It's his more esoteric talks and things. Yeah, down at the bottom there, what you were just showing, the radio talks and all of that. If you tab on that stuff at the bottom, you'll see all of the various categories of things. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Tuesday invitationals.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can look at everything that we've got, whether we have it, and you can see some of those that came out in the Holmes papers. We know that. If you go to the Sunday talks, you'll see that we have a lot of recordings of his Sunday talks. Some of them we have transcripts only because they transcribed them and put them in the articles in the Science of Mind magazine. You can see all that, from there as well.
Gotcha.
And we also they came out with a series of CDs about 20 years ago called Live Again with Ernest Holmes. And you can see there that the 4 Live Agains, it's identifying which talks those came from.
Gotcha.
So,
I want to go, I gave a prayer at a Silomar once. I want to find out if the archives has got it on video.
Video. The only video we have of Holmes is that one TV show.
Is that one TV show? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. That's the Holy Grail. Kathy can tell you stories about how they would find videotape and they would have it converted and they would all get excited and it would just be that same one program.
Well, we're gonna have to have Kathy on another show here sometime in the near future as well. So, before we do go, I want to share. I think there is something really important that you spoke of, and that is that we need to see the human side of Holmes. And I was brought up when I came into this philosophy. There's a handful of those iconic pictures, and there was a poster that was created a long time ago. There's a power for good in the universe, and you can change it. You can use it. And I've seen that in a number of different churches around the years. But it was when I first found there's a picture of Holmes in a flannel shirt holding up a fish. He obviously had just caught, or somebody had handed it to him. I don't know. But it really humanized him to say this was a guy that studied a little bit more than everybody else around him, that went to a little bit different of a place than everybody around him, that embraced the mysticism perhaps a little bit more than many of the people around him. And he was a man that we could learn from. And the philosophy has endured this long. The teaching has endured this long. I love the fact that we're working to preserve that and share it in a way that's going to be palatable to the coming generations. And whether it's video or some audio, it's a lot of audio. And as we move in, I'm sure there'll be some movement to create video around what audio we do have, even though we might not have him directly.
Well, I will tell you, there's a couple of projects that are in the works. One, a number of years ago, there were some recordings of some of the wise sages in Science of Mind. Some of these people have passed on, but those videos will be coming out on the YouTube channel for the archives over the next few months. We got somebody adding some titles and things to them, and they're going to be coming out on a flow basis. So a lot of these talks with the ministers, past ministers. And we're also now at the point that we're looking at the rest of the audio that we have, and we're discussing the prioritization of what's next after Holmes and Barker. What next? And there's, for those of you who follow this, we've got a lot of David Walker recordings, we got a lot of Fred Vogt recordings, and there's many other ministers through the years that there's lots of audio on. And so we're looking at what's next in terms of bringing out in an audio format. Right now we have so much Barker and Holmes stuff to work on. It's going to be it's a luxury project, for us to.
And you bring up Dr. Fred Vogt. We're here in Colorado. You don't get very far around New Thought in Colorado without running into somebody that remembers Dr. Fred. And I have cassettes of his, and we know there was a television show that he did for many years with Dr. Roger Teal at a point. So if we don't have those things, we know they're out there. And and so here's the call, folks. If you're watching this program and you have something and you're not sure, well, reach out to the archives. I think, we've mentioned a few things here today that are being sought after. And if I donated a whole box of stuff that I had amassed a handful of years ago, different cassette tapes and audio. And I know some of it was duplicate, and all it might take is just one. You might have a box of cassettes and one of them is something they don't have. And we're not going to know that until you pull that box out of the closet and send it off to us. So, perfect. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Pretty much run out of time. I want to say thank you to a couple of folks real quick and share our latest thank you video. Folks, it takes a lot to make this network run, and that includes a whole bunch of sponsors and donors and people and everyday people to keep this going. So stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We're going to say thank you to our sponsors and donors. Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors and donors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, and all of our individual donors and sponsors. Thank you for being a part of the New Thought Media Network. Please come be you. Yes, thank you, dear ones, for your contribution and supporting. Reverend Mark, thank you for being here today. I know you're becoming a regular around the network on various programs and shows, so I appreciate you making some time to join us here on this one today.
It's my pleasure. A lot of fun talking about all this stuff. I appreciate it, Robert.
Absolutely. All right, let's get out of here with a Holmes quote to finish us off today, but we're done, so we'll see you again next time. Until then, we wish you peace and richest blessings. Bye now.